Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough for me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Angel Maldonado, who's the CEO and founder of Empathy, and the website is empathy.co. Now, Angel, I hope, I'm praying, I know this is an audio and I've got my fingers crossed here, that I pronounce your first name correctly. But
yes,
hopefully you're still speaking to me. But welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Very well pronounced. I appreciate this very much, Adrian. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, Angel, for our listeners that don't know about you, don't know about your work, don't know about kind of Empathy, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch? Tell us a bit about you, set the context for us.
Well, to set the context, Empathy, we started it in 2012 with this idea. And the idea and the cocoon of value of search, search within online stores and online shops. And Empathy, the idea comes from the German. I don't speak German, so now talking about pronunciation, let's see how I say that, from the original concept of empathy, which was Anfühlen, which means in feeling. When you're looking at something and you project yourself into that which you are looking. So when we launched Empathy to do search within e-commerce, we thought, how about if we start with this and we are a little bit different on the approach. And we think of search not only about what it does, but about the way it makes people feel when they interact with it, which opens a whole world of possibilities. And that originally was the idea. And this is why we had the search technology and the UI interfacing technology, which has that preoccupation on negotiating the way people perceive search. And that's how we started, with bootstrapped and grew a lot. And we are very happy with this.
Nice. And before we get into that, because I know that I've looked at, I had, been sheep dipped in sort of search and stuff kind of prior to this, but I wanted to start from a position of asking you about something that we talked to in the kind of in the run up to this chat. And you were telling me about ethical commerce, which I thought was super interesting. But before we sort of get into that, I want to ask you to help me understand what you mean. What is the current problem? I mean, if we've got ethical commerce, does that mean we're in a place of unethical commerce? And so tell me what the kind of the current problem is, and then tell me about kind of ethical commerce and what's the difference. And I think hopefully you know what I mean.
Yes. Well, there is, if I may say, a crisis in the way we understand, the way we see, the way we think of users across any kind of digital product and even consumers outside digital. And that crisis of this particular generation, every generation has their own crisis, may be because we have come to try to understand behavior, try to understand consumers' choices, intentions, in the way we understand simple, lifeless objects, as opposed to embracing all that which data cannot see.
Mm-hmm.
We have come to objectify consumers, objectify employees, objectify relationships, objectify so much, thingify, some people say.
Mm-hmm.
So their problem is this reductionist view that is applied everywhere, really, as opposed to trying to have a more holistic view. And that's the inadequacy that within our particular space of e-commerce and the particular value we provide, which is people being able to find things that they're looking for because they search or navigate, that we try to challenge and put back on the table a more humanistic view of the notion of what a person is and a user.
I think it's, I mean, it seems to me that that's possibly been accelerated with, digital channels, particularly over the last kind of 15 or so, 20 years or whatever. But it's been around for a while, and that objectification of consumers, customers, as it were. When people talk about, wallet share, it's like, you reduce the person down to the size of how much is kind of like in their pocket that they're willing to spend, rather than actually trying to see the whole person and kind of what the thing or the things that they're trying to buy or do or achieve or whatever, what it means to them. And therefore it becomes, as you say, a reductionist, but it's also a very mechanistic view of kind of commerce.
Yeah. Yes. And there is that connotation in commerce, of course. Commerce, it is a system, and it has an input and an output and a number of steps within.
Mm-hmm.
But it is also an experience. It's something that should be preoccupied with the way people perceive it. It's something that can elicit or provoke wanted or unwanted emotions. It's something that falls in the realm of feelings. And just because data cannot tap or track those, it doesn't mean that we are not going to consider them important, right? So yes, that reductionist, mechanistic, as you say, a materialistic interpretation that has been extended to the notion of a person, and that needs to be challenged.
And so what is the kind of better way? Because I know that you're talking about kind of talk about empathy and in feeling and kind of like search and trying to do something that's a bit more sort of ethical. I mean, how does that manifest itself? Because I'm just thinking about kind of search, because I know that search on like a major brand or brands kind of websites is largely horrifying.
Yeah.
I remember doing a project with somebody, and if you put customer service into the search boxes kind of most things, I think there was one thing which was laughable. I got 77 different types of white trainers as examples, rather than going any link to going, oh, if you put in customer service or you put in help, then it goes like, it'll point you, you'll understand the query in simple terms and point you to a place where you can get what you need, which would be a profoundly empathetic kind of act, because you're going, I see, I listen, I hear, I do, I provide, I give you what you're looking for, rather than just trying to go, oh.
Yeah.
So how does it work, the empathy and your technology, your approach? I mean, because ultimately we look at things from a customer's, a human's perspective, is like, how do they interact with it? What do they get? What's the difference?
Yeah. Well, you search, or they call it information retrieval in the world of engineering. It's an incredibly complex, multifaceted, multidimensional problem, and it bakes in so much, and it has a lot of intricacies and complexities. And we tend to evolve search, or to find solutions for search that are based on what the technology can do. So, okay, now we have big data, and big data is cheap, and we can compute it easily. What can we do with this? And then you have, ways to track users. Oh, we can track users. What can we do with these and connect it with pools of data? And it's precisely from that way of thinking that we start to create scenarios which are frustrating, like the one, Adrian, that you have described, as opposed to starting with the idea, okay, there is a person in here. It's not a user. It's just like everyone else. It's just like any of us. And this person arrives in here with, thoughts and feelings and intentions, and it's going to make some choices. And I might not be able to know through data what those are, but there are things that I can know. For example, it is a person, and as such, expects to trust this space. Therefore, I'm not going to do anything that will provoke that they mistrust it. Right? For example, all the world of trackers and cookie policies and alternatives to those trackers and cookies, which can be even worse. For example, I'm going to think that that person wants to feel understood. It's very important, even though they just say one word in that search box. How can we try to evoke that beautiful feeling of being understood, right? That person wants to understand what's presented to them. So therefore, why can't we be more transparent? And ultimately, we enjoy something that is or aspires to be aesthetic and is physiologically agreeable, or it has beauty in it. And all those things that we just don't think of because data cannot give them. And all these products that you find that they're so frustrating, they only do things on the basis of what data gives. Data, Latin, datum, which means dado, given. And we just take a passive role. Data says that these users are happy because they are buying, or data says that these users have this intent because they did X, Y, and Z before. Data doesn't say that that person is not trusting this, or data doesn't say that this person felt frustrated. Therefore, if it doesn't say it, it's unimportant. What we try to do in empathy is to bake in things that might or might not be in data. And you take an active standpoint and you design for the person. A lot of people speak about that, right? Customer centricity, etc. But we need a bit more of a punk, as you say, or a spunk into the way we more creatively, with greater wit and grit, think of making things that can feel good or can negotiate the way somebody feels. So that's what we try to do. And in empathy, we started very successfully because we were providing these UIs for the search. And our customers were like, wow, this is beautiful. Why did you decide to do this like this? Why do the results move in correlated action with the search box? Why there is the same timing between the autocomplete opening and the facets appearing? You are concerned by the structure and the state of the harmony of the experience. What data did you use to come to these ideas? And it was just curiosity and a bit of imagination. Yeah. And a bit of common sense, perhaps, that those things are important. And it seems that we cannot do anything that's outside of what data gives us, right?
And so I think that's right, because I think it's interesting, rather, because search is often it's a forgotten, possibly maybe not forgotten, possibly overlooked aspect of how we engage with digital kind of properties, or how we engage with the search for information and wayfinding and all these different sort of things. But it, as you rightly say, is that often it gets the results get presented in such a way you look at it and just go, one, it's ugly, or it doesn't actually tell me very kind of much. It doesn't feel like it's in kind of context. It doesn't fit with the overall look and feel of something, and it's a bit like, so it feels a bit kind of jarring. I mean, I wonder if, as well, because we're in this changing data privacy regulatory sort of environment, whether this search and its ability to, is there a connection between that sort of changing data and privacy kind of landscape and the need to gather or develop more first party and zero party kind of data to be able to build the more personalized sort of experience? Is that, are you able to do that and almost use that, the data that you're gathering, the feedback that you get from kind of from the experiences that customers are having, is that being able to feed into sort of personalized kind of like search experiences?
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting what you say. It's as if search or even navigation or browse was an afterthought, something that was appended into an e-commerce platform. And a lot of the e-commerce platforms out there, they were built starting in other building blocks, but not the search or the navigation. And when they completed them, they say, okay, how do we add a search to this, right? And that shows in how frustrating search is, or how poorly integrated, and how misaligned it is to what people expect. And this happens also in the thinking of digital leaders who drive an online shop. They have all these preoccupations with the online shopping process, and the transaction space, and very little mental space is available to think that at the end of the day, when you go to an online shop or a physical shop, the very first thing that happens is that you are going to search or browse. And if we were designing with that in mind, I suppose, therefore, thinking in an experience angle, a bit more of a rebellious punk attitude to try to hit those first notes, we were thinking, okay, so let's start here. They're going to either click on the search box, and they're either going to click on a menu option. There's nothing else here. This is what it is. And work ourselves from that into the technology, as opposed to starting with the technology all the way down or up into the consumer.
Right.
So, and then again, all this coincides with the revolution of big data. And 2006, 2007, suddenly no SQL databases were available, and free, almost free, very low cost on complex computational complexities that before were intractable. And again, we started with the technology, and we work our way down or up into the consumer. We can do all these things. We can track every action. We can track every click. We can create personalized experiences based on all these things, and then we can put out there to the consumer. However, when you go to that physical shop, Adrian, and you walk in, somebody says, "Are you okay? You want to search my help to help you find something, or are you browsing?" And it's just the way it works. You say, "Well, I'm fine," and they just leave you alone. They're not going to be there spying and tracking everything that you do and you don't, and putting a locator device in your pocket and writing down the things that you are doing or interactions you're doing with other people in the shop. It's a very private, common sense space where you feel comfortable, and searching and finding stuff. But because we started with the technology, we brought into online all these tracking, customer surveillance approaches, right? And so much more. And we have confused and simplified very important things. For example, the whole notion of personalization that you mentioned. We think, and of course this has particular specificities by domain, but we think that because Adrian in the past, in the history, has done X, Y, and Z, we predict that in the future is going to do W or whatever action, which is a way of understanding Adrian's behavior, Adrian's intent, as a sequence, a bit like Pavlov's dog, basic conditioning. As opposed to, when you make a choice, there's so much more in your mind than just what you did in the past in that particular space. Again, if you start to think the way and design to people, you make a choice, you might be ordering coffee for a while, but suddenly, because in that moment, in the now, in the session, you are clicking on a particular category of other type of drinks, why is that less important than what you've done in the past? So what we do in empathy to the world of personalization is to challenge all that. And we only personalize in the basis. We don't call it personalization, what's in a name? We call it ethical contextualization. So we look at what you're doing now in the session. And based on what you're doing now, we provide shortcuts or being able to predict some of those intentions, aspire to do some of that. But we
don't. And are those predictions based on what you know from other work, other people, and their experiences, or
Exactly. Aggregate.
so that you end up building kind of almost like potential kind of like models of potential kind of outcomes, as it were, and then
Yeah,
you'll try and kind of fit those and to provide options.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. We are way more bolder in the space of our smaller brand, which is called motive.co, as in motivations.
Mm-hmm.
Motive, is designed to bring in thousands of smaller shops. Right now, I think as per Friday, we had 95 customers, which is a great achievement. It just came out weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Motive is a plugin that you deploy in existing e-commerce platforms. So you just buy it and deploy it in the moment, and it's for the small shop, a small to medium-sized company. And there we just say, no nonsense. This is a privacy full-on solution that it does use aggregates, as you're describing now, but there's no way you can apply any form of personalization.
Right.
It's only collective. In empathy, however, we have much larger customers like Zara.com, like Carrefour, like Kroger in the US. When the customer tells us, listen, we want to personalize, and we say, great, let's connect in session to your customer data platform.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what other products this person bought. So, for example, in the case of groceries, and we apply that in session. But when the customer leaves, none of that is written in empathy solution.
Right.
It remains in your existing solution. While our competitors, they keep on creating new silos of customer data, location data, voice data, images, to be able to have supposedly a greater value in the relationship with that retailer.
Right.
For us, it's just not to try to create more silos, but to connect with existing ones. So in empathy, we do offer also the personalized experience, but it's only read-only personalization experiences. Or you can see if you go to Zara.com and you click on the search box and it tells you what you searched for before. But that is written in local storage. It's not something written in an empathy cluster anywhere.
Right.
So we also resource to local storage. However, I believe the future of, and I do hope, the internet and consumption and demand-driven it has a lot of success to be in the small to medium-sized enterprises, in the makers, in the small shops. And for that proposition of the market with our Motive Co product, if somebody says, listen, I want to personalize based on what they did, so far we say no. It's just going to be a private guest experience, as it is on your existing physical shop, and on the basis of trust.
So I think it's interesting because you talk about that local storage idea, and I think that we talked about this before in the setup to this kind of call, and it reminded me of this. There was a wave a few years ago talked about the personal information economy and how people were. It's almost like this idea of wallets, so you can almost get to control kind of your own.
Yeah.
You get to specify your own data and control your own data, and then be able to dictate the sort of relationships that you want kind of with kind of brands. And it's not about more data, it's about better data. And if you have the control of it, because ultimately you're the arbiter of your own identity.
Yes.
Right. And we will choose that we will have different levels of, to your point, trust, different types of relationship with different kind of like brands, or no relationship at all. Exactly. Other than going, I want that, I'd like to buy that, can you please send me that? That's enough, thank you very much.
Exactly.
And do you think that's the kind of the way that things are going? Because I know there was a big rise in that a few years ago, but then it seemed to sort of kind of almost lose momentum or steam. But it feels like with the whole data and privacy personalization debate there, and the changes that's kind of coming to the fore again, and that feels like it might be, if you like, a really interesting way to approach the personalization, because it's not just about people guessing about what you want based on previous kind of behavior, because that's also kind of A, B, therefore C type of thing. And there is a place for that.
Yeah.
But also there seems to be another side of things where it's a bit like, well, giving customers possibly more control,
Yeah.
more agency in
Yes.
the conversation of what does personalization mean sort of for you. Do you think that's the way, is that where you guys are kind of going? Is that the way that kind of you think that the whole space is kind of going?
Yeah, and absolutely. We are trying to make that happen. We learned a lot from that. If anybody's interested, from this research group in Harvard called the Vendor Relationship Management, VRM. I think now they're being renamed as Me to B, as opposed to B to C.
Right.
It's a simple concept. It's like the nemesis of the customer relationship management, a centralized view that becomes a decentralized, not to be confused with distributed view. A decentralized view with every household becomes the platform, and you either automatically or explicitly you declare what you need in this explicit extreme demand driven declaration. Of course, it has different levels of potential impact on different domains, but imagine that rather than you go into Ocado or you go into Tesco or Sainsbury's to do your shopping, you publish your shopping list, and these places can read it because you have give them access to read it. So it's not you accepting the terms of Ocado or Sainsbury's or Tesco, it's them accepting your terms. You become like a company that publishes an RFP. And then there is an automated system or a broker of that, or whatever, or yourself, you accept which ones are those that agree more to your interpretation of value. Might be a price decision, might be other more ecologically driven or sustainable approach, or it might be whatever other interest that you might have. It's for this very practical approach to shopping has a great potential. So that's the space, yes. And there are technologies in that space that I also recommend people to look, either these specific technologies or those that are based on their principles, like SOLID, SOLID. It's a framework sponsored by Tim Berners-Lee, where you have pods, and these pods are customer data. The BBC has been working on this, and there's a very interesting article on The Wire of the way they do this to their previous viewing history. So rather than something that is distant from the household, stored someplace by virtue of that fact, is something that you don't trust, is something that you own, and you have the key to that. For the listeners of this, one way of understanding this world of VRM, of Me2B, that might help is to look up the way when you go to a coffee shop and you get your little card of loyalty that they give you, and it's your purchase history, right? And they go and stamp it every time you get a coffee, and when you arrive at 6 or 8 or whatever, they give you a free coffee. Well, it's you who takes that card and puts it in your pocket, and is not the coffee shop keeping that information, right? So your pod goes with you, right? And before, perhaps it didn't have opportunities because of the technological challenges, but everything has sophisticated. Before, perhaps, most importantly, it didn't have opportunities because people didn't know. The majority of the world didn't know that they were being watched, that they were being spied and tracked. And now everybody knows, and that pretty much changes everything. It makes sense, this approach. We're working hard in this direction. And local storage, I'm glad that sparkled the thought. It's a hyper simplified approach to this. It's the same pattern of approach. Although when you resource to pods or to these solid frameworks or similar frameworks, you have a richer approach to deliver this. So that promise we heard 1,000 times of the 360 degrees view of the customer that I want to hold. How about if the customer holds it?
Sure.
And then they trust you, read it. I might go to BA to buy flights, Or BA might come to me, and if I trust them, I let them see my calendar, my other flights that I use from other companies, my hotels or whatever, and they might implicitly deliver something to that, reading my data, but not taking it or writing it somewhere else. And when they leave and they provided their offer, that is gone. Bye-bye. Next time I'll invite you in to see my stuff. It makes sense, right, Adrian, this approach?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it makes sense. And I wonder, hopefully this time will be the world will be successful to deliver this sort of things, because I think there might be some people that might not be aligned with that sort of view. But that's the challenge with kind of when you end up kind of moving to shifting loci of control, as it were.
Yeah.
But that's kind of more sort of that's what you're working on. That's what now. But I wanted to come back to the whole search in an ethical and engaging, a personalized, a just better sort of like way. And I wanted to ask you if you can give me a couple of examples of sort of brands that you're working with, and tell me a little bit more about what they're doing, and how they're benefiting to help us understand what kind of like great or better kind of looks like, because otherwise it just feels like we're having a conversation about search. So actually it's the outputs, the outcomes, as it were, that are the really important things. Everything else is just a facilitator along the way, as it were. So if you have a couple of stories or examples that you can share with us, then to bring that to life, that would be really, really helpful.
Oh yeah, we do a lot of sophistication on the whole idea of local storage for personalized search. If you go to properties like Massimo Dutti, Oiso, Stradivarius, and you click on the search box and you start to search and you start to click on options, and then you come back to the search box the day after, and suddenly you see some recommendations and you see personalization and you see products that are being suggested to you or then and there in the same session. All that is an intense resource of local storage. So it's providing a personalized experience that doesn't require tracking permissions, that is not writing information in other tools, is only writing it within your own device. Now, somebody listening to this very rightly so will say, but that is not omni-channel. If I go to the app, because it's on local storage, I'm not going to see the recommendations that I saw on the web. And we say, absolutely right. But, we put trust and privacy as uncompromisingly as the most important factor. And those cases should not make this untrustworthy. Also, it's very interesting, Kroger is such a humongous, large player in the world of groceries, and also Marketplace in the US is our biggest customer in the US. And they have all these different brands, and then they have this project, My Purchase History Search.
Right.
And for the Purchase History Search, what we did is that we create an engine search per household.
Right.
In a bit of a technical note, is created when you go into My Purchase History Search, and then it's deleted, right? Because otherwise, with 61 million customers a day, it will be very difficult to compute that. So it is a private way of searching across your stuff.
Right.
Surely somebody would say, but all these companies are doing surely many other things with customer profiling information. And like the other samples I mentioned on Stradivarius or Oiso or Massimo Dutti, surely Kroger as well, they do other techniques that are more conventional. But that doesn't mean that these companies cannot still experiment and put in production things that are and provide alternatives that are more in respect of customer privacy. All the companies that are not our customers, but for example, that we follow closely, like IKEA. IKEA has been fantastic under the leadership of Barbara Coppola, who just moved into Decathlon as the CEO. She was the chief, if I am correct, product officer in IKEA, and she had this beautiful video and this beautiful culture in IKEA called the IKEA's Data Promise. which I encourage you to find, Barbara Coppola, IKEA Data Promise. And she's saying, let's start with being transparent. Let's start by explaining to our customers what our privacy policies pages are, as opposed to those unreadable. Nobody reads through those PP pages, right?
Yeah.
So they just went, this is why we capture data, as opposed to doing the way we propose, which is decentralizing, local storage. These companies still are entangled in having to capture data. So let's be very transparent in the way we're doing this. And let's make it, children friendly to understand when they arrive in these apps. And they have this beautiful privacy policy page they keep to evolve. So they exercise transparency. The BBC as well, in this project they have on the pods and household and BBC ID storage of your viewing history. And they have many other activities going on in there. So many companies are taking these important steps. Now, there are so many other companies, as you said, they're going to continue to be the status quo protectors because their businesses are essentially on the basis of customer data. The model is customer data.
Mm-hmm.
But I will review my investments in those type of businesses because it's very difficult to foresee that is sustainable. And I see, of course, these two worlds can coexist naturally, but it will be very difficult in generations ahead to keep on tracking and spying individuals now that they know. And this, now there are examples of these brands, I think it will become the standard, hopefully sooner rather than later.
And given that we're in such a a mobile first world where the smartphone pretty much drives kind of everything, and then there was Apple's stance around privacy and not making people's data for sale, and then their recent advertising campaign,
love it,
which was brilliant. And I'm not saying that Apple is perfect. I'm an Apple user, but they are willing to take a stand on some things, and the foundations of that sort of data-driven surveillance capitalist kind of model is being chipped away at, let's say.
Yeah.
And there's an alternative kind of path kind of emerging.
Yeah. I know a lot of people in Apple still don't get this. A lot of people in Apple still think and reason that consumers are in ways that other people think of them more objectified manner. But many other people in Apple, especially under the original establishment of their culture, they create products for people and things that have to be aesthetic, and a good experience is a private experience. A bad experience is that one spies and tracks you. They're doing the pattern of events in terms of privacy, trustworthiness, and ethical commerce and ethical digital products accelerated a lot in the past few years. But thanks to the input of private companies like Apple and the success of many others like DuckDuckGo, again, they have their pros and cons in their standpoint on privacy and digital ethics. But it's the question is a question of mindset, Adrian, and a lot of people, they struggle to feel comfortable to think that their value has to go beyond that which data can give, or demonstrating their value has to go beyond that, and they want to play the conventional tunes where they feel safe, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think what seems to me what you're trying to do is to show that there is a better, or is there is a different way, the different way that turns up the volume on privacy, but then in a way it's like it's in a connected kind of way. So if you turn up the volume on privacy, it doesn't mean to say that you end up with kind of like nothing or something that's a bare solution. Actually, there are other things that you can do in terms of the aesthetic, in terms of options that are provided, as about wayfinding, all these different sort of things. So they can it's not like a binary thing. It's like going privacy on, privacy off, as it were. And therefore privacy on just looks like this kind of like bare room which is unfurnished, as it were. It's not start like that. There's different ways. It's like from the 1980s, it's like a graphic equalizer.
Yes.
And you pull some things down, but then other things could kind of go up, and it's you're modulating different sides. You're creating a different experience that is respectful of people's preferences.
Yes, I love that. I love that metaphor and that comparison. Certainly, in actuality, I do believe that a way, way more interesting and richer world of possibilities opens up, and there's so much more you can do when somebody trusts you, and there's so many more incredible ways. And when trust is not in the room, whatever that room may be, nothing happens, and trust is just not anymore in the room. And if we try to work around, like all these companies now, they're going, oh, we're going cookieless. And now it's a big moment to go cookieless. And they are putting in horrendously dangerous alternatives to cookies, because they remove the cookies, but they put these other server-side trackers and IDs. And actually going cookieless is not, they still didn't change the mindset. It's not about cookies, yes or no. It's about, doing the right thing and respecting the customer the way you like to be respected. I was at this event. We launched recently the Ethical Commerce Alliance, ethicalcommercealliance.co, and it's an alliance for the world to be taken. And if anybody wants to participate, it's theirs. And we were in this event with Carissa Belef, the author of Privacy is Power, and Rafael, which I can't remember his surname, but he drives Simple Analytics. And then we were in this conversation, and Rafael said, well, this is the moment everything changed to me in the world of digital and tracking and surveillance. The moment I saw my son using a digital product, I started to think, the things that we are doing to people like my son perhaps aren't adequate. And it's interesting that we approach consumers in ways we wouldn't like to be approached. I wonder if the executives behind YouTube Kids or Instagram, whatever, ad tech, or the people who is behind a company that promises to predict what the next click will be, do believe that their next clicks are predictable? Do they see themselves as things, or they let the children interact with those products that have all those strategies to, productize attention? So it's a bit of a, taking a stand and seeing consumers the way you like to be seen. There's not much more than that, right?
Yeah, no, otherwise it's just, it's properly dissociative, and there's probably some sort of psychosis kind of that you could probably delve into on that. But Akala, when I just kind of like anything, because I want to kind of I'm conscious of your time, and conscious of you were telling me that we're in, at the time of recording, we're in the summertime, and you've got some of your kids are at home, and they're probably waiting kind of patiently to start heavy streaming again. But let me kind of move on and ask you, is there anything else that you'd like to add or highlight that we've missed out before I kind of take a step back and ask you a couple of just quite general questions?
No, that's good. Let's move on. Thank you.
So I've been talking about this idea that I think we're emerging from the pandemic years, let's say. I think that's how we might label them kind of going forward. But what are some of the big lessons that you've learned over the last couple of years that are going to inform how you're going to do things going forward?
Big lessons. Well, so many aspects and so many lessons, Adrian. One big lesson, many smaller lessons, but the big lesson for me, thinking a lot about what has happened, is that every generation has their own crisis, and it's not something new to us because we have gone through a pandemic. My parents had a financial crisis to cope with, or a real estate crisis, or their parents had some health and being bombarded by tobacco companies and toxic products. Their parents had perhaps the more monstrous crisis, which is war. So every generation has a crisis, and now this generation that has for the most part grown up with the internet, social lives developed on social media, this climate crisis pulsating. Now they had this pandemic crisis on top of all these. So the realization that there is a kind of a constant human crisis, that is not just us now with something new, and that there's been always a kind of a war between trying to do the right thing and put morals on the table as it is happening now. And that's a big realization, because it encourages me to go even stronger and even more bolder on trying to elevate users and consumers as individuals, respect their autonomy to make choices, break from this idea that they are things and objects whose behaviors can be known and used and uncovered, and really, really take a super strong standpoint on this moment. As I would have hoped that my parents or their parents or their parents have taken on whatever crisis they have lived through. So that's my big realization, incredible amount of motivation to bring back a more human approach to, and a real one, because people speak and say and do or think differently, but we really have to act on these things, and not just some soft preoccupation. It is a big thing that individuals are being objectified, and unethical stuff that's going on when you want to get an insurance, when you want to get a mortgage, packages that you get offers or not, job interviews. I don't know, so much that's going on this reductionist view of individuals. So the big lesson is that we really, really, really have to give it all out to take a stand for what is, I believe, is right on elevating humanness in consumers.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. So building on that, then what would be your, if I had to ask you to boil it down, what would be your best advice to someone who's listening to this, who's going, how that sounds like it's for me? What's the first thing I should do?
It's a very simple advice, perhaps the golden rule.
Yeah.
Just try to, when you think of your new product, your new company, your new feature, your new capability, just don't think of a user. See a person like everyone, and create things that you would like to be created for you. There are people like you, and they're all equal. They are all equal. Why would you create something for the market that you wouldn't like to happen to yourself or to your children or to your parents? That is a hypocrisy, right? Try to challenge that. If you want to create a movie, if you want to open a shop, if you want to create a brand, if you want to create a process to solve something, do it in ways that you would like to be done to yourself. We seem to have forgotten that.
Yeah. No, but it's worthwhile kind of like giving people a reminder of that, because actually you're right, people get caught up in their own little hamster wheels and seem to forget these things every now and again. So a couple other kind of things before we go.
Yeah.
These are the word association ones I was telling you about, the kind of the punk things that I've been gathering since I published Punk CX and then with the Punk XL late last year. And I've been collecting all these words. It's like a word association thing to do with Punk CX. So there's a list of just over 150. So let's see kind of what you come up with, Angel. When I ask you, what one or two words would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience?
Well, I promise I didn't prepare this, but it comes to mind: data disobedience. Inevitably, you, of course, and wit and grit and spunk, but data disobedience, perhaps, or in other words, take an active standpoint on data. And yeah.
Awesome. I'm going to put data in brackets and just have disobedience.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I think that's that. So yeah, about data, yes, specifically, but also kind of generally, it's a bit like going, yeah, go your own way.
Exactly. Yes.
And so, what company? Then related to sort of this Punk XL idea, this punk sort of experience leadership. What company or brand do you think epitomizes an experience? Who do you think is an experienced leader? Like, who's raising the bar? Who's talking about things in and delivering things in a holistic, systemic, integrated sort of way that's kind of raising the bar for people? Who would come to mind?
Well, big name that comes to mind is Brewdog, for example. They really, from the very beginning, have taken a very creative, very holistic uh, angle on the way they've been growing the business, the way they've been supporting their employees, the way they've been sharing, and I think it's a very good example. But besides the big names that we know, like this example, every small shop and maker that you find when you walk around, I don't know, Shoreditch or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and you see so many people starting up with new ideas, and they are all punks of
Yeah.
whatever type of item they're putting out there. They're being very creative and very open and very disruptive and very mischievous in
Yeah.
the way they're trying to push forward their newness, and that's beautiful. So I do strongly believe that the future for all these hundreds of thousands of smaller makers of things, they have that common quality, that they are not afraid to challenge the status quo, to run the risk, to be driven by the passion and the determination to create new stuff, and as opposed to the big players that are trying to find ways to sustain their status quo.
Awesome. And one final one, which is a bit of a new one, that I've been adding at the end of these kind of these chats, because I just wanted to finish on a lighter note,
Yes.
because the world's a bit strange.
Yeah.
Well, it's always been strange, but it seems to be more strange than normal over the last kind of like a few months, last kind of couple of years.
Yes.
And you can wake up in the morning and go like, oh gosh, what else has gone on overnight? And so I thought it'd be good to end on a more interesting sort of positive note. And so I've been starting to ask people, what is the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week? So we can end on a good news story.
The last week, well, as the immediate thought that comes to mind is the noble gestures on everyday people, and the everyday people I have close to me, and most innocent is my 5-year-old. So yes, there's a new girl in the school. Now she's with her in summer camp that just came from Japan.
Okay.
And she's been amazing with her. And we are, they say that children have no empathy, but we were very admired. We admire very much her attitude to try to support this girl who barely spoke English. And yeah, so that was a noble thing to see. You see those noble gestures everywhere on the day to day, and they give you great hope, right? And many of the things that you see on the day to day. Yeah, there's so many out there, but this is one that I'm close to that comes to mind, which of course.
Well, that's nice. It's and I think that's the thing is there's a personal sort of view or kind of whatever, just things that stood out to people, and that's what I've been trying to. I'm sort of exploring, getting people to share their what's positive and what's interesting, what's new, what's exciting for them over the last week. But
yeah,
I feel that's kind of like that's all I have. I wanted to say that it's been an absolute pleasure sort of talking to you. I want to congratulate you on the work that you're kind of doing, because I think it's important. I think it's on the edge. It's kind of aligned with kind of where this particularly a growing and emerging, but yet rapidly growing sort of conscious space, where people are at, not customers. And I want to reduce people down to being customers or consumers, and where people are at around this stuff is important. We need to have agency. We need to have control and input into this. So congratulations on that. Thank you for sharing your time and your experience with us today. That's been super cool.
No, thank you. I'm glad that this resonates, and I think so constitutionally to your work. And this, I'm like dying and looking forward to read your book. Reminds me of The Medium is the Message from McCullen on the outside. I really want to get my hands on it, so I'll be looking forward to dig into that. We need better metaphors to create ideas and products, and I think that the one you put forward on music and rebellious music in the form of punk, I think is perfect. Is spot on. We need to bring more metaphors. Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you. Pleasure.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.